Yes, yes, yes. What is up? What is up, MCR family? Another daily edition of the show. Actually, two shows today. One early today with Rob, breaking down all the boxing topics, and one right now live on YouTube podcast from iTunes, Spotify, radio, etc., breaking down all things MMA and previewing UFC 243, Robert Whittaker versus Israel Adesanya, going down in Melbourne, Australia. Oh, come on. Can we just get like a... Yes, air horns. This fight is chef's kiss gif from Simpsons. It is that good, okay? It is perhaps one of the best fights that's been made this year, and I'm very lucky to be joined by a good friend of mine on this show to break down this fight and the rest of the topics in the MMA world. Anthony Walker from Sharedar.com. Anthony, how you doing, man?
Pretty good. How about yourself, my man?
It's good. It's not like we just did a show earlier together in a way.
It's not, yeah, it's not like we haven't talked in the past couple of hours. So yeah. But yeah, I'm happy to do it all over again. I'm really excited for this main event. UFC 243 is a garbage card overall, but has a fantastic main event. So I'm really pumped for that.
It definitely is lacking in certain depth for sure. And plus with the Holly Holm fight falling out against Raquel Pennington, loss of depth there automatically. But there's some highlights in the card, some certain names that we might talk about. Obviously, the co-main event, I think, is a great fight against Dan Hooker versus Ally Quint. I think that's a great, fun, lightweight matchup between a top 10 guy and a borderline top 15 guy in the division. Cannot wait to dissect that one with you. But let's break down the main event itself. Obviously, Whittaker versus Adesanya. I know who you are picking. I know you're picking Whittaker to win this one. Break it down for me a little bit. Why do you think Whittaker has what it takes to be the surging, momentous star that is Israel Adesanya?
Well, first off, I think it's important to note that this only rings true if we're going to see Robert Whittaker at his best. If we're going to see a healthy Robert Whittaker, which is something we haven't seen for quite some time. Now, I think that when we think of Robert Whittaker, we think of primarily a kickboxer, and that is a fair description. The striking is where he is the best, but he's also a guy who worked on his wrestling to the point where he was just shy of trying to go for the Australian national wrestling team, and apparently he would have had a spot on there had he chose to. Yes. And the only thing that stopped him was the UFC saying they'd strip him of his title if he decided to go that route. So we're talking about extremely high level wrestling. Already knows he has a high level of striking, and I think that combination. Oh, excuse me.
Oh, well, God bless you, sir.
Thank you. The allergies, man, are kicking my ass with the season change. But yeah, man. I think that he has a great opportunity to mix things up in a way that Israel Adesanya is not used to seeing, in a way that Kelvin Gastelum could not. I'm really excited for this fight. I'm honestly wouldn't be shocked if Adesanya pulled out a victory, but the money for me has got to be on Robert Whittaker. He's a proven guy. He's a guy who's been in there against more elite level competition. I think he's more battle tested. And yes, I am still thinking about that Gastelum fight. That was an amazing fight. But Whittaker has been through those several times over and has come out on top. I think he does it again Saturday.
I definitely understand the logic behind a Whittaker pick because it's probably the safer pick, right? Like you said. The second you say someone has fought better competition, that's the easier pick. Guaranteed 9 out of 10 times, that's the easier pick, is the guy who has fought better competition. Always will be. However, to sort of poke some holes into the argument that you put out there for Whittaker defeating and having the technical and stylistic sort of combination of skills, so to speak, to beat Adesanya. First off, the wrestling of Whittaker. While you are right that he was very close to being the national team, and from Luke Thomas's reporting that he could have if it wasn't for the UFC coming in and intervening, I think that largely has not been shown on the UFC level from an offensive standpoint. Defensively, we know that Whittaker is one of the best defensive wrestlers in the middleweight division, if not the best. I mean, he went... What is it? How many minutes with Yoel Romero?
50 minutes with Yoel Romero.
And how many times was he taken down? I think it was like
maybe
twice,
once.
you know, and
And the first fight, he blew out his knee in the first round. It was defending takedowns from an Olympic silver medalist
so
on one leg.
so obviously the counter wrestling that Whittaker has been able to sort of take in and adapt and evolve with it within his game over the last several years is evident. I don't think anyone really needs to dispute that. But then again, that's not really needed in this fight. Adesanya is not going to go for takedowns. He's not going to go drop down for a double leg or a single leg. He's probably not going to do that. So then we have to look at, okay, where has Whittaker been efficient and effective from an offensive wrestling standpoint? And to be honest, he really hasn't in the middleweight division. Luke Thomas did a fantastic breakdown on obviously the Mortal Kombat channel, dissecting his middleweight run of wrestling, so to speak. And there's been 3 takedown attempts from him in his entire middleweight run. And I think that is such a small sample size to really say he has, or not that he has, but that he likes to use wrestling in order to beat certain opponents like Adesanya. We haven't really seen that yet. You can maybe argue with Uriah Hall that certain grappling exchanges, certain takedowns at times in that fight were crucial for him winning the decision in a close fight not too long ago. But I think it's clear that while Whittaker is a good wrestler, that's not an implementation of his game at all. He really hasn't tried it. And on top of that, even with the Uriah Hall fight, I wouldn't say he was that successful and really that efficient with his wrestling and grappling in that fight. And I think Adesanya is showing great grappling, or I shouldn't say great grappling, vastly improving grappling ability from fight to fight that, in my opinion, should really counter the non-offensive wrestling game of Whittaker. Because while he has good wrestling, he doesn't use it. And it would be hard for me to say all of a sudden this guy who doesn't use wrestling from an offensive standpoint will be able to use it off of and I have to combine it with the X factor you wanted to sort of make a caveat and table it, but the layoff. And on top of that, the wars that he's been in. So you have a guy that's been inactive, facing a really stiff competition lately, and he's facing a lot of damage in that competition lately. Facing a guy that he needs to have a game plan that he really has never implemented before. That's going to be hard. I feel like Whittaker is going to be stuck in the striking game with Adesanya, and then we have a discussion there. Because Whittaker's boxing game is definitely superb.
And he's very good at closing distance.
His jab, his flurries. Yeah. Even at times you get almost like a Machida sense with his quickness when it comes to combinations, bolting in, right? I think he has deceptive power. I think he has great tight combinations when he needs to throw it. A great sense of when to throw single shots or combination shot selection overall, I think, is pretty great. But Adesanya is clearly just either better in every category than him or significantly better than him in every category when it comes to the striking game. And I feel like because this game is going to be stuck in a striking mode most of the time, you're going to have some grappling exchanges, of course. It's going to be maybe scramble heavy. But at no point do I think Whittaker is going to be able to keep Adesanya on the ground. I don't think that's a possibility. He's never shown that.
No, but see, that's not actually the implementation of wrestling I'm expecting. I'm expecting to see a 2.0 version of what Kelvin Gastelum was able to do. What Gastelum was able to do was to threaten the takedown. He landed 1 or 2 here and there, but to get a hold of a leg, push him against the fence a little bit, and stifle just the part of his brain that says, okay, I'm kickboxing now. If you're able to do that, you might have some success. And Gastelum was able to land very effectively on Adesanya. Now, with a striker the caliber of Robert Whittaker, if he is able to threaten with just the possibility that he can take you down. Now I know that offensive wrestling is not something that he has done a lot of in his career. But if you are about to make a national team for wrestling, you know how to take someone down.
Absolutely. No. Again, he absolutely has the skill, but to not implement it is a clear sign of something. Whether or not it's mentally that's not in his style yet to actually shoot for takedowns. You know what I mean? Like that's a style of fighting.
The guys that he's fought since that time, kind of refining his wrestling. Those are guys that you're not going to try to take down. You're not going to try to have a wrestling battle with Derek Brunson when you have the striking of Robert Whittaker. You're not going to do that against Jacare, who's one of the best guys on the ground, period. you're and Yoel Romero, a silver medalist in freestyle wrestling, you're not going to do that either.
Of course, and he did shoot for a takedown against Romero, but I think that was largely because he was hurt at the time.
Yeah, that was more like a desperation takedown.
Again, I think the Uriah Hall fight is probably the best parallel we can use, right? Is because Uriah Hall is a lanky traditional striker, kickboxer as well. Like he's the best parallel in the middleweight run that he's had. Because other than that, it's probably going to be maybe
Wonder Boy is the best.
But that would be a welterweight, right? That'd be a welterweight.
Yeah, welterweight. But as far as like the caliber opponent, the sort of strikers that he's faced that are similar to Adesanya.
Yes.
I mean, but I think he's a much different fighter now than he was definitely when he fought Wonder Boy.
That's why I don't count the 170,
and then even Uriah Hall.
I don't count the 170 run for him because, again, he was drained for that division. I think you compared it to the middleweight run. He is just a different fighter here. But Uriah Hall wasn't too long ago, 2015. I know that is now going on 4 years. I can't believe that. But that is the last traditional striker he has fought. And like you said, he has fought traditionally grapplers since then. Rafael Natal, Derek Brunson, Jacare, Romero. These are all grapplers. Mm-hmm. And even in the Uriah Hall fight, grappling wasn't a thing that he was dominant in my opinion. And on top of that, I think that was part of his game plan. Now, can he implement it in this fight? Maybe. And now to your point more so about the threat of the takedown then having a effect on the striking of the fight, just the pure threat of that takedown, right? Obviously, that sets up different shots, different angles for punching combinations, absolutely, even different kicks, right? We saw even the Gastelum head kick that hurt Adesanya. That was set up, that was set up through a takedown feint, if you look back on it. So, can Whittaker sort of implement what Gastelum did right in that strategy in this fight? Absolutely. But then we're also dealing with a guy like Adesanya who's been evolving and greatly evolving with each fight. It's harder to say that with Whittaker because his last couple of fights have been against the same person. They've been back-to-back wars that have been controversial decisions where a lot of people think the other guy won. And on top of it, like you said, the first fight he was injured. So that automatically stopped sort of what can we see from Whittaker in terms of growth because he was on one leg. The game plan instantly shift. The second fight, I would say we saw a little bit of the same Whittaker as we have seen, especially in the Jacare fight. So I don't know what version of Whittaker we're getting here. While I know we have an Adesanya that is improving drastically and is clearly at the world level. And I know the idea of like who's been in the fire more. I think obviously the 50 minutes with Romero means more than 25 minutes with Gastelum, but the 25 minutes with Gastelum, I think, is a clear indicator that Adesanya can potentially take whatever punishment and damage that Whittaker throws at him. And if he doesn't, it's probably due more to the fourth and fifth round of a sustained punishment. Maybe Whittaker has a great night, and he's on fire, and his jab's on point. He's threatening with a takedown, and we see a late fight stoppage. But I'll be honest, I don't think we see that. I think we see not necessarily diminished Whittaker, but a Whittaker that has stalled in a way, because that's what happens in your career. It's the Dominic Cruzes of the world that can come back from 2 years and knock out Muzugaki in 30 seconds, then come back 2 years later and beat TJ Dillashaw in a split decision. That is rare. I don't know if Whittaker is that guy yet, and I like Whittaker, but it's hard to bet on that, to be quite honest.
But also, let's keep in mind too that this wasn't just pure inactivity for Robert Whittaker. He hasn't been laying in a hospital bed the entire time. Like he had 2 fights that were canceled in the last minute after having training camps for them. So it hasn't been like he's been totally inactive. So I think that's something to keep in mind. Whereas if he had just had a series of ACL tears back to back to back like Dominic Cruz, then we're talking about a very long period of time where he's not really doing anything. There's been time for Whittaker to improve upon his skill. There's been time for him to make technical adjustments. It's just that when it came for fight time, something happened last moments. He's no longer eligible to compete. And then we have the issue there.
Agreed. It's just one of those, it's a little bit of a question mark right now. Right. Adesanya, to be honest, in the right now is actually the more proven product. And I don't think people realize that. We look back on the Romero fights, but those are a little bit a while ago. And on top of that, again, those are controversial close fights, and I think that gets lost at times as well. But moving on to the rest of the card, co-main event, Dan Hooker versus Ally Quinta. And your thoughts on this fight? Because I'll be honest, Ally Quinta is one of those guys where there's moments where I'm like, man, he's all of a sudden really putting it together, and he might make a run for the title. And then he fights Don Cerrone and just gets outstrike and just gets beaten up all night. Dan Hooker's a long, rangy striker who is improving drastically in the same camp as Israel Adesanya, so you know that he has that same great coaching. Are we going to see a similar sort of fight as the Cerrone fight for Ally Quinta?
I think we might in parts, but I do think that he'll be able to use the veteran savvy. I mean, Donald Cerrone is so battle tested. He's a guy who has been in there against so many people, against so many different styles, and he's proven himself worthy in just about any scenario you throw him in, especially in an extended fight. The longer the fight goes on, he starts picking up steam. This is a 3-rounder, and we're dealing with a guy with a lot less experience than Donald Cerrone, a guy who doesn't show the same ability to adjust on the fly as Cerrone has been able to show. I see Al being able to kind of jam him up. I see him being able to stay in his face, keep the pressure up, and kind of stifling Dan Hooker. Now, you know, maybe this is Dan Hooker's time, and that's not so far out of the realm of possibility. It's certainly the betting odds have it even enough to where you're like, I think Hooker is a slight favorite in this. So this really could go either way, but I'm feeling Aya Quinta getting in there, getting in his face, jamming him up, and making life difficult. And with 3 rounds to work, you really only have to outpressure him and outmaneuver him for 2 rounds to make this game plan work for a decision win.
It's definitely going to be close. I think if Ally Quinta can get in close and start throwing combinations, and Dan Hooker can't really get that separation that he kind of needs to get his kicks going, to get his long straight punches going, it could be a rough night for Dan Hooker. And as we've seen, especially with like Edson Barboza, if you get a little bit inside that range of Dan Hooker and start unloading with your own shots, Hooker doesn't react well. He doesn't react defensively well. And on top of that, he will just sit there and take a beating. I can see this being a 3-round sort of beating for Dan Hooker, but I am sort of sensing a crossroads moment for Ally Quinta, a guy that has also been inactive at times, not really, I think, been committed to combat sports the way you need to be at this high level, and that's why we saw him beat Kevin Lee and then lose to Don Cerrone, which makes no sense in my opinion. I think we're going to see sort of that moment here where he should win against Dan Hooker because he is more experienced, is clearly, I think, a little bit more refined in terms of boxing ability, and plus his wrestling, I think, is far better than Dan Hooker. But is he focused enough? Has he been in the gym enough to evolve his game and to stay with the times? Like a Dan Hooker who's in the gym all day, every day, a young guy that has the fire for the sport. I'm going to take that more often than not, usually, against the old guy that doesn't really seem to have the fire, so to speak.
So you really doubting how much Aya Quinta has been training? Like, did you not see the man in the gym with Bagel Boss?
I knew the second you said training, I'm like, oh, he's gonna go Bagel Boss, isn't he? He's 100% gonna go Bagel Boss, and then 2 seconds later, you proved me right. Yeah, I definitely doubt what his sort of focus is when he's trying to help Bagel Boss guy fight. By the way, did not show up for his fight.
Yeah,
he bailed last minute.
Trash.
Snowflake.
And see that was y'all hero, huh? All y'all fools out there watching, that was y'all hero. Bagel Boss was it, huh?
But back to the fight.
Pumpernickel Pump.
Yeah, all right. I think again, if Ally Quinta was fighting 3 or 4 times a year, he might be a top 5 guy in the division. Like, he could beat Justin Gaethje potentially. He could beat a lot of these guys. I think you run back the Cerrone fight, if he was dedicated to the sport, he should beat Cerrone. Like, he should not have lost that fight. Right. I think the obvious disdain for the UFC's management has led him to not really have that hunger for the sport as he used to. Shouldn't really be shocking. But this should still be a fun fight because even a unfocused, unmotivated Ally Quinta still brings it every time. And these two guys stylistically should produce a fun fight. Now, the rest of the card, instant drop in competition level and just quality. I mean, you have Tai Tuivasa versus Sergey Spivak. My name is so much better, by the way. Spivak.
Yeah, actually, your name sounds cooler. But
I mean, definitely. You're a Star Trek villain in my story. Jake Matthews is on the card against Rostam Akman. Megan Anderson versus Zara Dos Santos. It's rough out here in these streets. Let's be honest.
This is $60 for Whittaker versus Adesanya, essentially, and Dan Hooker versus Iaquinta, damn good fight too.
It's the good salad or soup before your main entree.
Right, and Tuivasa versus Sergey Spivak. I'm pretty sure someone not named Tai Tuivasa is going to go to sleep in this. I'm pretty sure about that.
But then again, Tai Tuivasa definitely seems like a guy that never really trains. Like I don't know how he has gotten this far, not in life, but just like in the
heavyweight.
sport.
It's heavyweight. Like that's essentially what's going on here. I mean, it's if you can hit hard, you might have a shot. So this is shout out to the homie Ben Duffy, fellow guy at Sherdog, who's done it. We've done a lot of podcasting together lately. Mm-hmm. And one thing that he was very adamant about on our panel show, Unleashed on the Walkout Network, was that this was a card that was made to please Australian fans. This was a card to have the Australian guys or New Zealand guys, anyone from the Oceanic region to come out there and just floor someone, because the matchups are done in that favor. So maybe looking at it through that light, maybe I'm rethinking Iaquinta versus Dan Hooker, but for the rest of the card, like most of these guys should smoke whoever is in front of them if they come from that region. Like that's the idea. The only fight on here that's truly that's like, oh, really just question oh my God, I have no idea what's going to happen, are two guys from the Oceanic region fighting one another in the main event.
Yeah. I mean, there's tons of fights. I have no idea who these guys are. So like anyone could win. I don't know. I don't care. I'm
making assumptions about the rest of the card, straight up and down, because
there's another Oceanic versus Oceanic fight.
Yeah, and that's Brad Riddle and Jamie Malarkey. And
Malarkey, by the way, great name.
Yeah, that is a dope. That's a really dope name. So I mean, I don't really know much about either one of these guys. Check out their records real quick, but UFC debut for Malarkey.
Yo, I also like. Hold on, I like the I don't know what country this is. Hold on, Jorgen De Castro versus Justin Tafa. Two heavyweights with a combined record of 8-0.
Yeah.
Oh, at least my God, that's gonna be a dumpster fire. At least
Jorgen De Castro came from the Contender Series, so I'll give him that. But Justin Tafa has been, he's had a couple good knockouts on the regional circuit in Australia, and is now on a UFC pay-per-view main card. Like
he's had 3 fights. What they're doing. He's had 3 fights, dog. And he's a heavyweight. That means he's gonna be so bad. Oh my God.
Yeah, this is gonna be a really, really bad fight. That is going to be a dreadful fight. But somebody's gonna get knocked out in that one.
And they have it where it's like the show actually in Australia is on Sunday, but it's gonna be Saturday prime time for us, right?
Right. So it starts like Sunday morning, I think, for Australia.
I feel so bad for the Australians. Like, why not just make it prime time? Honestly, like I don't. And don't make a pay-per-view. Shocker, I know. Oh no. Yeah. Digressing though. Moving on to another card coming up this weekend. Then we're going to cover a brief rumor / news story that I'm going to be making up and really pushing out there to the masses, and then sort of circling back to the last weekend of fights, UFC Copenhagen, Bellator, Dublin, 227, 228, the smorgasbord of Bellator cards that we're going to be talking about. Why the fuck do we need that much Bellator? But Bellator 229, Korskov versus Larkin. First off, I like the main event, obviously, but the rest of the card's a truly Bellator card, so I have no real thoughts about that. And it's a really long card. I mean, I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4,
Yeah.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 fights on this card.
So the breakdown of this card is totally illogical. There are 2 prelim fights. I think there are 6 main card fights, and the rest are post limbs.
I know.
It's Bellator is. I'm not quite understanding what's going on over there sometimes. Like this makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. But at least post limbs, when there are post limbs, you kind of know not to pay attention to them. Like that's just kind of what it's saying. It's making it very clear these are the fights to not care about. These are the fights that we put on this card to make sure people stay in the building because it's their friends and family members in the crowd. So it's filled during the main event. That's essentially what this is.
It's the equivalent to like maybe like a blooper reel in the credits of a movie. You know, like not enough as like a cut scene to like hint at like the next Marvel Avengers movie, but like it's a blooper reel. Like if it's funny enough, you might stay and watch the credits in the movie theater. But
it's like at the end of every Jackie Chan movie where it shows the stunts that went wrong.
Yeah, like maybe you're down for it that one time, but most of the time you can kind of check out. You've seen it before. It's the same shit. You can catch on YouTube.
Yeah, and the thing is, they do have some good names on this Bellator card. I mean, obviously the main event, Saad Awad is a good guy to watch. Joe Schilling, who's a notable name from the kickboxing world, who now, granted, he has a sub 500 MMA record, but he's been dividing his time between both sports. Apparently now he's going full time MMA.
He shouldn't.
See if that yields any results.
It won't. It won't.
Ye of little faith.
Yes, definitely. Like we really don't need to talk about Bellator in depth because they have made themselves quite clear what level they are in the pecking order. But question from the chat, 92 Aku, who's a good supporter and listener of the show, more of a boxing guy, so I understand the question. Is this fight bigger? Is this fight a bigger deal than a Jeff Horn fight? Well, first off, 92, this fight is in Marvel Stadium down there in Melbourne, right? And that's a gigantic soccer stadium, right? I want to say like it's like
60,000 or something like that.
It's a big one, and this one's going to sell probably 40 to 50 something thousand. I'm going to assume. Is it sellout? Have they announced it's a sellout?
I haven't seen an announcement that it's a sellout. I got an email yesterday, I believe it was, saying that there were still tickets available.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how many. But I do know that the goal is to break the record set by Rousey and Holm, which I think was that I want to say 53,000 in attendance for that.
I want to say like 55. But so compared to maybe like Pacquiao Jeff Horn, which was also in a big stadium, but I don't think it was a one that big. I think it was like a 35,000 seater. Don't have that on hand at the top of the head. But this is probably equivalent, if not bigger, and probably bigger, to be honest, mainly because it's an all-oceanic fight. It's Australia versus New Zealand. Mm-hmm. And that in of itself makes it something unique, you know?
Yeah, and then on top of that, too, I think now Adesanya has positioned himself as the villain of this fight. For multiple reasons. One, that he's the louder guy, he's more brash, he's a cockier guy. But
naturally,
I don't know if you watched that press conference that took place around UFC 241. That they had the press conference in Australia, and he was getting into it with some fan or something that asked a question about his heritage, and he's saying like, "Hey, I'm not." A Kiwi. I'm an African. I'm black, and the crowd didn't like that too much. And those are the sort of things that will instantly propel you to being a villain in the eyes of the fans that are looking for a hometown or home country star.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how his stardom sort of transcends and rises in that region of the world and also in the U.S., right? Because he's also, I think, a burgeoning U.S. star